Hey, it's Lauren with Bead Box Bargains. On today's Bead Brief, we are going to be talking about agate. Some of the different forms of agate. There are many. Some of the most common forms. We're going to talk about some of the most common natural agates, how to tell if your agate is enhanced, and some of my favorite forms of dyed and heat-treated agate as well. There is so much agate on the market. You've also got similar stones like carnelian, black onyx. We'll talk about what some of the differences are there too. So to start with, let's go through some of the common forms of natural agate. This I think will kind of go slightly alphabetically. So we'll start off with Botswana agate. So agate at its core is a form of chalcedony, or if you prefer, chalcedony. You can say it either way. In the South, we tend towards the drawly one. So I naturally say chalcedony, but if you hate that, I apologize. You can say it both ways. I've heard it both ways, as Psych would say. All right, here is Botswana agate. It is often a grayish toned agate, though it can also be very orange. Here's a strand of orange Botswana agate. One of the things to note about it, one of the most common things, is the combination of gray, white, and brown tones, with sometimes with orange too. You can get strands that have more or less of any one of those things, along with really strong lacy pattern, linear patterns rather. So I've seen a lot of gray agate marked as Botswana agate, but it didn't have the orange tones or the patterning that you'll see. And it could be a lower grade Botswana agate, but oftentimes it's not actually. So keep an eye out for that. And when you're looking at natural orange Botswana agate, you should have some peachy tones. You should have some white in with it too. The more expensive strands are going to be really vivid orange, but it has this peachy quality to it with the undertones that traditional red agate does not. Here's some red agate for comparison. So you can see the natural Botswana agate does tend to be a lot more on the peachy side. Again, it's a natural material. It will vary, but if you're shopping for Botswana agate, look for the combination of gray, white, and brown and or orange. Sometimes it can have some really peachy reddish tones in there too. Look for good striations, lots of nice patterning. That's what you should be looking for when you're looking at Botswana agate. Another common form of natural agate is blue lace agate. So this is another one we see on the market a lot. I love blue lace agate. This blue lace agate, it is a blue chalcedony, and it's got some white quartz patterning inside of it too. That's what gives it its name and what distinguishes it from blue chalcedony, or chalcedony again if you prefer. So it is going to be a lot more expensive than a lot of dyed agates. I have seen recently on the market imitation blue lace agate. Now this is a resin-based product, and it is often a very, very strong cornflower blue with a ton of white patterning. It basically looks a lot like the resin form, the imitation form of malachite, or malachite rather. That's where the quotation mark should go. Anyway, one way to tell that your blue lace agate is natural, it should be cold to the touch. Resin will not be cold to the touch, and it should make some pleasant clinky sounds when you knock it against it itself. It should sound kind of like, it should sound like a stone, sound kind of glassy, and not the dull thuds that you get with resin. So again, it should be cold to the touch, should be kind of clinky, and you might see some brown in natural blue lace agate depending on the grade you're purchasing, which you will not see in the resin. So generally, so yeah, just be aware of that. I love blue lace agate. It's one of my favorite natural agates. It's absolutely gorgeous. Just so pretty. Okay, another common form of natural agate that I don't have any in stock of here today, so I'm going to show you a picture from our website. This is crazy lace agate. Very swirly, lots of patterning. And I have seen dyed versions of this stone on the market recently, but your natural version, you're usually going to have yellowish browns, white, some deep browns sometimes as well, sometimes some gray tones, and you're going to have lots of crazy lacy patterns. So that's what you should look for when you're buying crazy lace agate. Okay, another common form of agate is Indian agate, and this is also known as fancy jasper. Neither one is necessarily more correct than the other. I tend to refer to it as fancy jasper on my website, but there's nothing wrong with calling it Indian agate. It is a form of chalcedony, and it has some other minerals mixed in with it that put it, agate, jasper, it's a sliding scale there. So this stone is typically not treated in any way. You'll have lots of gorgeous green colors. You'll have some reds and purples and whites, sometimes browns, and you have lots of beautiful patterning with this as well. So yeah, again, can be called fancy jasper or Indian agate. Either one is correct, and it is a natural material. Moss agate is another common one. And if you get the bargain bead box, you have just received some of this in November. So this is our dark green, semi-translucent to fairly opaque. Sometimes it's more translucent than others. And you have a lot of gorgeous dendritic mossy patterns. So this is a form of dendritic agate, very similar to tree agate. And basically the main difference, I believe, and this is based more on my personal observation, so if you're a rock hounder or a geologist, or you know more about this than me, feel free to correct me, but I believe that moss agate and tree agate are kind of two sides of the same, they're both a dendritic agate, and if you have more green than white, typically you're going to classify it as moss agate. If you have more white than green, typically you're going to call that tree agate. Here is another strand of tree agate. So you can see this one's very strongly white with some subtle dendritic green markings. Sometimes we get in strands that we call mossy tree agate because they're such a mix of moss agate and tree agate. Both beautiful natural materials. I love, love, love the deep greens in this stone. So yeah, definitely want to take a look at those. Okay. Here's some natural white agate. So if you have those gorgeous brightly dyed strands, this is a matte strand. So if you have like the gorgeous brightly dyed agate, it probably began its life looking something like this. This is a natural agate before it's been dyed. And it is very nice. You've got, again, the same kind of subtle browns and grays that you sometimes find in Botswana agate. It can look a lot of different ways. This is a matte strand that I want to show you as an example. White agate and gray agate are not always enhanced. So why do you enhance agate? Well, you do it because agate takes dye really well and it makes some stunningly beautiful beads. So let's take a look at some dyed and heat treated agate. Heat treatment can naturally cause conditions that intensify the color. Well, I say naturally, I mean it's an artificially created environment, but it causes natural changes in the stone. So if something is heat treated, that does not necessarily, like heat treatment itself does not introduce any outside color. It just creates optimal conditions to affect the color of the stone itself. Dyeing, you're adding outside color. And a lot of agate beads are dyed and heat treated, both to enhance their color and to create fun patterns. So crackle agate is a good example of an agate that's been dyed and heat treated. Anytime you see this is a dragon veins agate strand, which gets its name from those intense crackly vein patterns. And I love how they pick up the dye differently than the rest of the stone on a lot of the strand, and you get these really fun patterns. So any kind of crackly agate like this, it's more often than not, I'd say 99% of the time, that's a sign of heat treatment. You get this wonderful crackly pattern in the stone. Here's another strand to show you. Absolutely gorgeous purple agate. See how beautifully it picks up the dye? So dyeing agate, I mean, it costs money, it takes time and effort. Dyed agate is not necessarily less valuable than the natural white agate. It's just not. It just makes it different. It makes it, it enhances the look of the stone. So I don't want you to walk away from this feeling like if an agate is dyed and heated, it is less valuable. Now, if an agate has been dyed and heat treated, it's probably because it's a more common variety than, say, a blue lace agate or a Botswana agate. These are both more pricey premium stones. So it is true that a dyed heated agate is usually going to be less expensive than your natural Botswana or blue lace agate, just because if you have a rarer, more expensive material like blue lace agate or Botswana agate, you're typically not going to dye it. That said, there is nothing wrong with using dyed and heat treated beads. My problem is when stores try to market them as though these vividly purple stones magically sprang from the earth, because that is not correct. I want you to be very clear about any kind of enhancements that have been done to the stones at Bead Box Bargains. And I want you to know when you're shopping in a craft store or online marketplace, how to know when a supplier is being truthful with you. Because a lot of the times, even factories will be like, oh yeah, these are completely natural agate. And you're like, no way. That gorgeous hot pink, while it's beautiful, did not come from the ground looking like that. That has been color enhanced. And again, there's nothing wrong with color enhancing agate. It makes gorgeous stones in colors that you wouldn't find otherwise with agate. So I love enhanced agate beads. What I don't love is when enhanced agate beads are being sold as natural. So I'll show you some of our other dyed strands. Just like you can get such gorgeous colors out of agate. It does, it takes beautifully, and you get natural variations because of the variation in the stone. The dye soaks up differently in different places. Aren't these beautiful? I mean, just absolutely gorgeous. Another form of dyed and heat treated agate that is painstakingly done and very expensive are Z beads, DZI. And these are patterned after ancient Tibetan artifacts. It is an involved process to get these amazing patterns, and you can find all sorts of different patterns. Here are just a couple. I love the stripes on these melon beads, or well, they're not melon, they're rounds, but they look like melon. They look corrugated because of the stripes on the sides. And then these have beautiful eyes. I love that grayish stone pattern over this red agate base. These are dyed and heat treated to create amazing designs. And I wanted to show you these because this is an example where the treatment enhances the value of the stone. These are way more expensive than buying the natural red agate or the white agate that before it was dyed blue. So treatment to agate does not necessarily decrease the value of the stone, but the type of agate that is used for these kinds of beads is typically not as expensive to begin with. So just wanted to, again, show you some examples of dyeing and heat treating. Okay, so some other common questions that we get are, what is the difference between red agate and carnelian? And that's a really good question. So here's some carnelian. Here's another strand of carnelian. And here's some red agate. And in case you can't tell the difference straight off, it's basically carnelian is red agate that's less stripy. That's really all there is to it. It's a more solid red-orange color, and it is often color enhanced as well to really deepen that color. Heat treating it can really deepen those red oranges, and dyeing can make them more even. You can definitely get natural carnelian as well. It does, but a lot of the carnelian on the market is just accepted that a lot of it's going to be color enhanced, or at least that's been my findings. And then this is also color enhanced red agate. And you can see you've got a lot more stripes and swirls and patterning, chevrons, more white on these, and these beads are going to have less of that. You might still have occasional subtle stripy patterns because, again, they are both the same base stone, the same form of red-orange chalcedony. Sorry, I did the wrong thing. Chalcedony. My brain, I swear, I'm a very visual person, and it doesn't help that most of my learning comes from reading. So I apologize for mispronunciations, but yes, my red-orange chalcedony. So there we go. That is the difference between carnelian and agate. So the other question that we get a lot, how about onyx? What's the difference between onyx and agate? And to answer that, I'm going to show you a black onyx pendant and a black agate pendant. Just one sec, I'm going to open them off screen so it doesn't get all crinkly. Okay, so here is a black onyx pendant and a black agate pendant. And the biggest difference, I wish I could have found a stripy black onyx, but the ones I have in stock are pretty monotone. The biggest difference between an onyx and an agate is that if an onyx has stripes, they're going to be parallel to each other, just with the way that particular form of chalcedony is formed in the ground. And agate stripes can go anywhere. They can zigzag, they can loop. So it's basically, onyx is an agate that if it has stripes, they're parallel stripes. Here is a strand, or they are at least mostly generally going to be parallel. So here is a strand of green onyx. And you can see there's not a lot of stripes, but when they do occur, they are parallel to each other. They are bands. They are not the whorls or the chevrons or the loopy patterns that you sometimes get with agate here. The Botswana agates are a really good example of this. You do have some that are more just like straight parallel bands, right? But then you also have these like super whirly, see this bit here, how it loops back on itself and zigzags. Yeah, that is not a kind of pattern that you will see in onyx. So that's the main difference. It's the stripes. Agate is allowed to do what it wants with the stripes. They go all over the place. Onyx, if it has stripes, and a lot of the time black onyx is going to be dyed, and a lot of the time it won't show stripes, though it might. If onyx shows stripes, they're going to be parallel bands. So that is the difference between agate and onyx. All right, I hope this has been helpful. If you have any other questions or comments, or if there's another stone you'd like me to kind of deep dive into, or any other topics you'd like to see in an upcoming bead brief, please let me know in the comments. I would love to know what you'd like to learn about, and I love learning about new things all the time, and I'm happy to do some research and see what I can come up with. So thank you all so much for watching. Thanks for being here. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. And as always, happy beading.